Greetings. So the question I had asked was, what did you think of pantheism, right? So, thinking of the entire universe as God. I suppose that was interesting. Some of you said, oh yeah, that solves a lot of the problems. It does. It solves a lot of the logical problem. If God is infinite and nothing can interfere with the infinity of God and so on, then having the universe being at least part of God, if not equal to God, solves that problem, because if the universe exists opposite God, then you have obviously God limited by that separation between God and the universe. So Spinoza's response to the definition from the scholastics, what God is, essentially, is actually a logical consequent of that definition. So that's pretty interesting. On the other hand, it also destroys the relationship that we have with God. As some of you pointed out, gosh, that kind of defeats the relationship we have with the divinity, because after all, then God is everything, including the mud, the blood and the beer, all the parts of the universe then were part of God. So how does that divinity, how does the good and the bad end up being resolved by that kind of thing? It sort of wipes out the whole point of religion. If the whole universe is God, well then, so why is that even a deal? Right? It's kind of interesting too, because if we think of God as love, which I think is a central tenet to Christianity, and it doesn't always seem to be the way Christians act, obviously, but nonetheless, if you follow the theology, that seems to be one of the core principles, if not the main principle of Christianity, is that God loves us. Then it seems odd to think of the universe as God, and it is clearly heretical to think of God in the Christian sense as the universe, and it becomes considered a heresy. So pantheism is heretical from a Christian theological viewpoint, and is often also referred to as Spinozaism. So a Spinozaist is a heretic in the Christian theological sense. And there's some others that end up having problems because on the one hand they accept a lot of Spinoza's arguments, but on the other hand they want to remain a Christian in good standing, so they don't want to get in trouble with the church or even the Protestant sects in that regard. And so they have, on the one hand, the problem of accepting the logic of his reasoning and saying, yes, this seems to follow. And his ethics basically ends up being very persuasive in that regard. On the other hand, how then do you find a sneaky way, basically, to avoid the implications of all of that? And so Gottfried Leibniz, who we'll be talking about, was one of those philosophers, young man, even spent 2 weeks visiting with Spinoza in the Netherlands and arguing over exactly this, and he came away still wanting to be a good Christian. In fact, one of Leibniz's goals in life was to bring Protestantism and Christianity back, and Catholicism back together. Right? He felt like all the reasons that they had for breaking up into various sects and the Catholic Church were basically theologically frivolous, and you just basically had to overcome that. He could see the theological reasons for it, but of course by then it had also become very, very political, right? So different states were Lutheran and other states were Catholic, and the states that were kind of a split really had quite a lot of problems because of that. So Leibniz's goal of reuniting all of Christianity certainly never happened. But he also had trouble because, as he explained his monadology, as we'll talk about, a lot of people saw in it Spinoza's philosophy, and so critiqued Leibniz as not even being theologically a good Christian because of that association, which he had to fight constantly to make sure that he didn't get condemned as a heretic along with that point of view. So you're treading a very fine kind of point of view theologically when you're accepting the power of Spinoza's explanations and yet at the same time trying to remain theologically sound as a good Christian. Another individual that has a great deal of trouble with this is Hegel. When we look at Hegel, we clearly will see some interesting Spinoza-like problems with Hegel's conception of the Weltgeist and its relationship to the Heilige Geist, or the Holy Spirit, right? So when we think of Hegel, we'll see a lot of these same Spinozaist issues, but they always are very clear to defend themselves against it because they want to remain orthodox in their point of view. So that's kind of interesting. But also part of what Spinoza gives us is this sense that all people are in the world as part of God. And so we ought to be tolerant to everyone, despite their differences and their philosophical points of view, their religious points of view. We should instead be tolerant with them. And so that becomes a very interesting, persuasive point among a lot of people. And one of the ones, of course, that we're going to look at today is John Locke and how he interprets that. Hobbes, Leviathan, Spinoza. I guess I should quick look through this. So we did talk about Spinoza. I didn't play the little video about him, did I? There's a little video that I like to show with regard to him. I guess I can do that real quick.
This is proved by reason. How can God be nature? How can nature be supernatural? The supernatural does not exist. There's no life after death. A mind cannot outlive its body.
They were all into optics, the study of light. Immensely puzzling, as you can imagine. Ever since Hobbes' argument that it's all these little particles actually penetrating your eye.
The scope of the human intellect. They had no science. Joshua, or rather, the author who wrote his history, he thought that the sun revolves around the earth is fixed, and that the sun too stood still for a day. And the quibblers amongst us try to explain all this away with obscure and impenetrable language, but there's no cause for perplexity. Joshua was a soldier, not an astronomer. Even Solomon, Isaiah, no, they are not exempt from human shortcomings. They were ignorant of the true cause of day and night. religious prejudice is a veil which protects the mind from reason.
But surely not all faith is blind.
Perhaps. But it is always one-eyed.
So, notice this is on the web. It's easy to find, just Spinoza, and you can recognize it. And it's I think, a very well done kind of overall summary of Spinoza's life and his philosophy, and it's done in a kind of nice, artful way. So I recommend this if you have, what, about half an hour? Oh, I guess it's an hour. So obviously they cut out the commercials, but you get the idea. So have a look at that. But so what's interesting is he's going to be familiar with Hobbes, and he's going to be familiar with Descartes. A lot of his books are written in Descartes' style, which the Meditations does not actually give us, because it's written really for kind of a more popular kind of audience, actually. But in his other works, he uses a presentation method of giving the definitions and giving the axioms based on those definitions, and then giving logical propositions that then can be shown to be proven by the axioms that are already given. So it's like algebra and so on. So you can basically try to use that same kind of method in all your reasoning processes, not just in algebra, for example. So he uses that, and in fact, if we look at the piece we have in the text, it is written that way, the Ethics. So for example, I just opened it to a particular page, right? Page 495, of the nature and origin of the mind. So I now pass on to the explanation of those things that must necessarily have followed from the essence of God, the eternal and infinite being, not indeed of all of them. For we proved in Proposition 16, Part 1, that from his essence there must follow infinite things in infinite ways, but only those things that can lead us, as it were, by the hand to the knowledge of the human mind and its utmost blessedness. So definitions. 1, by body, I understand a mode that expresses in a definite and determinate way God's essence insofar as he is considered as an extended thing. See corollaries and propositions, etc. Right? 2, I say that there pertains to the essence of a thing that which, when granted, the thing is necessarily posited, and by the annulling of which the thing is necessarily annulled, or that without which the thing can neither be nor be conceived, and vice versa, that which cannot be or be conceived without the thing. 3, by idea, I understand a conception of the mind, which the mind forms because it is a thinking thing, right? So you see he's working with Descartes' cogito ergo sum, right? 4, by an adequate idea, I mean an idea which, insofar as it is considered in itself without relation to its object, has all the properties, that is, intrinsic characteristics of a true idea. 5, duration is the indefinite continuance of existing. 6, by reality and perfection, I mean the same thing. 7, by individual things, I mean things that are finite and have a determinate existence. If several individual things concur in one act in such a way as to be altogether the simultaneous cause of one effect, I consider them all in that respect as one individual. So those are the definitions. Then he moves on to axioms. Axiom 1, these are undoubtable, right? The essence of man does not involve necessary existence. That is, from the order of nature, it is equally possible that a certain man exists or does not exist. Absolutely true. 2, man thinks. Agreement?
Sometimes.
Yes, yes, yes. Women think more, but men
Definitely.
think. So. Sorry. He doesn't say that. That was mine. I just threw that in. 3, modes of thinking, such as love, desire, or whatever emotions are designated by name, do not occur unless there is in the same individual the idea of the thing loved, desired, etc. But the idea can be without any other mode of thinking. 4, we feel a certain body to be affected in many ways. 5, we do not feel or perceive any individual things except bodies and modes of thinking. So you have to have a body to feel. So that's interesting. So then he moves on. Those are the axioms. He moves on to proposition 1. Thought is an attribute of God. That is, God is a thinking thing. And then he gives a proof for it, right? Proposition 2. Extension is an attribute of God. That is, God is an extended thing, etc. Proposition 3. In God there is necessarily the idea both of his essence and of everything that necessarily follows from his essence, and so on, right? So he's following Descartes' process, giving you definitions and the axioms that he considers indubitable based on those, and then the propositions, which then are proved, are relating to the various axioms and so on. By the way, while Descartes, remember, is officially a mind-body dualist, as we talked about, right? The homunculus sitting in the driver's seat, and that is a complex problem for Descartes, as we also talked about. Antonio Damasio, remember, wrote the book Descartes' Error, etc. So you can't really have any way of conceiving how the spirit could interact then, even through the pineal gland, with this body, because there's no interrelationship possible between two completely different things, right? Spinoza, by comparison, is kind of in between Hobbes and Descartes. While Descartes gives us that conception of the two different parts of the body, the spirit and the mind and the body, right? Hobbes, remember, gives us just the body. So it's very clear there is no such thing as a soul inside of this body, at least as far as I've ever seen in anything of Hobbes. It's very clearly just empirical, Aristotelian, physical, body, right? Spinoza, as he describes, right, is in between, because on the one hand, the body, once the body dies, there's no continuation, there's no soul that continues on afterwards, right? But at the same time, he is a mind-body dualist. So there is a mind that's separate from the body for him. And yet, despite the interaction that's described by Descartes between the mind and the body, for Spinoza there is no possible interaction. He takes that dilemma that Descartes has, how on earth does this soul interact with the body, and Spinoza says it doesn't interact. They're two parallel modes of existence, right? So in one sense, I think of my mind as experiencing the world. In the other sense, I have my body experiencing the world. And the mind doesn't cause my body to do anything, and the body doesn't cause my mind to do anything. So I'm not actually experiencing things through my body. My mind is having direct connection to all of its experience, and the body is not reacting to things. So if I raise my arm up, I think that I did that deliberately because my mind said, okay, I'm going to demonstrate something silly, right? I'm going to raise my arm up, say it went up, right? For Spinoza, there are two parallel modes of existence. My body just so happened to move exactly the way I needed it to, exactly when I was thinking that it was going to do that. Not because my mind and body are connected in any way, but because God has created the entire universe such that these two parallel modes of existence are completely coincidental, so that as I'm on the one hand thinking I'm doing something, my body on the other hand doesn't, right? But there's no actual interaction between them. And that just sounds really, really stupid, doesn't it? Doesn't that really sound stupid? Well, as you come up with other problems like, well, but how do I know my body did it then if there's no input into my mind? Am I thinking in my mind so that how do I know my body's reacting the way I think it is, right? So how do we explain this? Well, my interpretation of it, and this is me, and remember, I'm fallible, so, and I'm old, so I forget stuff. You know, I don't even know what languages I speak. You know, sorry about that. I know someone asked about that, wasn't it?
That was me.
That was, and officially in the Army, I tested for 3. So French, German, and Russian. Russian was my primary language. And they have grades, right? So I was 3-3 in Russian, which, you know, that's way above what I needed to be. 2-2 is the requirement. And I had over that in both French and German too. But I had also studied Polish. But the thing is, when like Czech is in between German and Russian. So like if you study both German and Russian and you hear someone speaking, you know, I know what they're saying, but I'll be darned if I know what language they're speaking. How do you figure that out? You know, it's just weird. You know, so and Polish, I can hear Polish, and I'm like, oh, I know exactly what they're saying. Although when I try to speak Polish, I end up getting shot because, you know, I'm not Polish. I'm speaking Russian, and they think I'm in. Oh, don't talk to me. You know, and I'm like, I was trying to be polite. You know, you know. How do you tell? How do you tell? You know, like if you're from Philly, you know, you could talk like this. It's still supposedly English, you know. But you know, and all you have to do is scrunch up your mouth and your face a little bit, you know, and then you're okay. It was a hilarious time when I was in Nome. The one time I was talking with a National Guardsman, and he said, "Your accent is very strange. I can't place it." And I said, "Oh, well, I'm from Philadelphia." He thought a minute and he said, "I've been all over Alaska. Where exactly is Philadelphia?" I love it. That's great. So languages are just really weird that way. I mean, Dutch is kind of half German, half English too, right? You know, as you cross, you know, like, so you go from zwei, 2, to 2, and in the Netherlands it's zwo. So, you get that. So it's very confusing. Plus, I'm very confused. I do think if you study too many languages, you just become really weird. So be careful. The Army tested us on 10 for, we had to be familiar with 10 enough so that if we heard it, we knew what label to put on the tape. Romanian. You know, sorry. Maybe that's secret. Shh. Don't tell anyone I said that. Okay. Now I got lost. What was I talking about? Spinoza. So this is really weird. What's he talking about? Mind, body. And they're two parallel things. They're not interacting. So the appearance relationship between my mind and my body, they're two separate modes. They have no interaction whatsoever. What on earth is he talking about? I interpret it as two different vocabularies for talking about the things we experience. That's my interpretation of what he's trying to do. So in one vocabulary, I have a way of describing my body's acting on things. I'm doing this because, ow, that hurt, etc., right? On the other hand, I also have a vocabulary where I think of myself as a free agent that's making decisions. I have a whole vocabulary that explains why I behaved a certain way. Do the vocabularies actually interchange? Well, I think so. But I think in some respects he's talking about these as like, well, like, you know, love doesn't really interact with, say, like biochemistry, and yet on the other hand, it certainly seems to, right? I mean, you can, so, I mean, I could say, oh, I'm falling in love, right? And I'm experiencing elevated testosterone and serotonin, you know, whatever, right? You know, maybe oxytocin, oxytocin, right? You know, the bonding, biochemical, right? And all that. So I could describe it that way. Oh, yes, you have elevated all these things. Ah, you're falling in love. And I'm like, what does this have to do with the feeling that I have? Right? I mean, we can explain, oh, okay, so if you're feeling these emotions, your biochemistry is reacting this way. Oh, okay. You know, it was an absolutely hilarious comic in the paper yesterday or today, where, maybe it was Sunday, where Dilbert, right? Is Dilbert comic? Let me see if I can find it. Dilbert at the Hackers Convention. Oh, so I found Dilbert, but I can't find the Hackers Convention. Sorry about that. I'll just tell you the way it worked. You know Dilbert, right? Okay, so Dilbert is at this Hackers Convention, and he's got his phone, and he meets this woman. You know, you can tell she's a woman because of the way they do the hair, right? You know, how Dilbert does, right? And she's on her smartphone too, right? And as he's coming up, he says, hello, and she says, I know you're Dilbert, and you're, you know, I know everything about you because I just hacked your phone, and I hacked your wristband, and I hacked your, you know, so I know you're this, and plus because of your wristband, I even know you're falling in love with me at the moment, right? And he's like, oh, no, it doesn't. I didn't have to find it. But his reaction is, he's too slow. She was faster than him. And he says, I'm finding out that you don't like me at all. And she's walking away. And yeah, because I've hacked your stuff too, you know, so it's just hilarious. So what does the biochemistry have to do with the actual feelings? It does seem like there's two modes of our way of thinking about those experiences, right? Because you know, like I can't, if I bring a bottle of female pheromone, you know, and go like this, you know, Jeremiah, right? Doesn't all of a sudden fall in love with the first woman. Actually, you'd probably fall in love with Jeremy, right? Because you know, it's the, you know, just, oh, that's right, I was the one. Oh, that was. Well, remember in what Harry Potter, where he ends up having a love potion from somebody, Matilda Vane or whatever. Romilda. Okay. Well, so he's actually hugging Professor Slughorn, right? You know, like that was Ron. Yeah. Right. You know, because he's got the love potion now, and he's being introduced to Romilda Vane, but it's actually Professor Slughorn. So he comes over and he hugs him, you know, and he's like, yeah, we better treat this pretty fast, right? But you can actually buy pheromones today, right? Everybody knows this? Mm-hmm. You buy the pheromones, right? Yes? No? Oh my goodness. Beware. You could be snookered by some guy with pheromones.
You'd be being hacked biologically.
So you can actually buy these. Do we want the truth? Oh.
Nah. Fiction is better.
Well, Smithsonian. This is an advertisement. Yeah, we can't trust the Smithsonian, right? Yes, scientists say your airborne compounds send signals about your moods, your sexual orientation, and even your genetic makeup, etc. You know, so this has been coming for years. When I first started reading about this, most people were like, nah, it's animals. Animals have this kind. And I was like, hey, we're an animal? Animal, right? Yes? Animal kingdom. And I even had one local friend who's also a opinion columnist for the paper, then became a senator, etc. Well, whatever. And he said, I don't hold to that philosophy that we're animals. That was funny, actually, because, well, it's not like a philosophy. It's like, it's biologically true. We're called mammals. Mammals are animals, etc. And so the discovery of these pheromones and how they affect animals, and people were wondering, do you think that affects people too? And a lot of people are going, well, we're animals, of course it does. No, because that would mean that you're falling in love with someone because of the way they smell, and not because of like your free agent self that decides that you are in particular enamored of that person's character, right? Pretty darn annoying, you know. It seems like it ruins that free agency, self that I think of as me, that I'm the one that decides what I like. It's not someone so-and-so is walking by, the bench I'm sitting on, and all of a sudden I'm in love just because of some, whiff I had of her pheromones. It's just weird, right? So, but yes, as we learn more and more about that, it became more and more pretty clear that yes, of course, we react to them and other things too. And yes, in fact, now they can capture them somehow or manufacture them and add them to colognes and things, especially like male cologne. It's not like the females are like dousing themselves with all sorts of colognes to attract more men, because all they have to do is like show up and men are attracted, right? But the men are sprinkling themselves with all these weird things so that women, but they've been tested and it works, so be careful. The only thing that I guess could help is that it is a little bit more expensive to have good pheromones in your cologne. So if you're attracted to the guy because of the pheromones he sprinkled on himself, at least he's got money.
One way to look at it, I guess.
What can I say? Okay. But so that's my interpretation of how Spinoza could be a parallel mind-body dualist. They do not interact, but they are nonetheless both there. How do we interpret that? My interpretation is that we have these two vocabularies, ways of thinking about these things. So modes. Other way, he also argues that God being infinite, God has no limitation to just two modes. God has an infinite set of modes that God experiences. We, however, have the mental and the physical. And so we're limited as human beings to just those two modes of existence.
We get the starter set.
We get the starter set. So nature is God. Laws come from God. What he means is like gravity, not thou shalt not kill, right? But the physical laws that like Galileo is discovering, Newton is giving us, the very essence of God is nature being as it is, a lawful self-caused system. So there's no intervention in the normal course of events. So, praying for God to intervene doesn't really do anything. What really is important for you is like not jumping off the cliff and hoping that God's angels will save you. Don't jump off the cliff, right? That's very important, right? Science is the way God works. So if we want to do theology, what we have to do is science, because God created the universe, that God is the universe, and so basically finding out more about how the universe actually works by doing science, looking at it with both eyes instead of just one closed, is the way we can actually find out more about God. And the more we find out about God, the more we realize we're all in this together. We're all creatures of God, people of God, and so we should all respect one another instead of kill one another because your God is different than mine, right? So the end result of this, of course, is that John Locke, who's going to spend time in the Netherlands, it's unfortunately after Spinoza dies. Spinoza dies very early because he's grinding lenses, and despite the fact that he's a scientist, grinding lenses is a relatively new profession, and they don't realize that when you do that, you're going to inhale ground glass.
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, it's very bad on your lungs, and so guess what? You die. Your lungs basically deteriorate. So he's pretty young when he dies. But John Locke is really, really interesting. Is going to come while he's there. So this is I think a little interesting. Which do we want? We could go either way. Oh, we'll go this way. That's good. So William of Orange. By the way, if you like swashbuckling kind of novels and you like Dumas, like The Three Musketeers, you could also read The Black Tulip, which is by Dumas, The Black Tulip. The Black Tulip. It's a historical novel, Alexander Dumas. And William of Orange is one of the main characters. It's kind of actually funny. He's like a always riding around on his horse with like a black raincoat. So he's kind of a mysterious character. You don't really know how he's manipulating everything that's happening. But as the first citizen of the Netherlands, William is not a king, but he is the nephew of James II, and he's married to Mary, who is James's sister. Or daughter. What, I forget. What is? I think his sister.
Yeah, I think it was his sister. I think you're right.
Go back. William, his wife. So it's William and Mary, right? Mary, co-monarch. And who is she? Okay, so her husband, who is also her first cousin. So this explains the nose. No, that's just a joke. But they are intermarrying pretty closely, so that's pretty weird. So James II, his uncle, is the King of England after Charles II dies, fairly young. Right? The interesting thing is, while Charles II was a Protestant, James II, who had been raised Protestant, Church of England, had converted to Catholicism, so he was a Catholic. And yet when his brother dies, they smoothly transition to him being king, even though he's officially the head of the Anglican Church as king, but at the same time, he's a Catholic. Mm-hmm. And so for, I guess, roughly 3 years, he's king, and everybody thinks this is going to go really, really well. But he's actually planning on trying to get the whole country back to being Catholic. And of course, they're all thinking he's going to support the Church of England. So as over those 3 years, various laws end up being argued over, etc., it becomes more and more clear that he's trying to become an absolute monarch and a Catholic monarch in the same way that his other relative, Louis the XIV, what is that in English? Louis, shoot,
14th?
14?
Yeah, I believe so. It's parallel to that. I just learned all this Western Civ too.
How do you spell Couture? I don't even remember. 14. The Sun King.
Yep.
So James II is trying to he's using him as his role model, actually. And guess what? That's not going to go over with Parliament. So Parliament ends up overthrowing James and bringing in his nephew, William of Orange, and that's referred to as the Glorious Revolution.
They made them cede all power too once they took
So
over.
notice he's the stockholder of Holland, the Prince of Orange, but he becomes King William III. Shoot. I don't know what I'm clicking on here. So, anybody familiar with William and Mary in Virginia?
I think it is.
Been there twice. Williamsburg.
That's
Been to
right,
Williamsburg
yeah.
twice. And beautiful, interesting tourist trap. You know, you get to see everybody wearing the costumes of the founding fathers period. No cars allowed on the streets. And they deliberately have ox carts with horses and wagons that poop in the street, so you can see them all cleaning it up in their dresses and stuff, which is. And if you go to the restaurants, you're eating food that's supposed to be from that time period and stuff.
Quaint.
You look like that would be horrible, but
Like
Williamsburg.
fun.
Yeah, Williamsburg. It's actually fun. It's expensive though. It's almost like Disney World, except there aren't any rides. So you pay like a big ticket price to get into town. Deals, events, attractions, hotels. Plus you can't even get kissed by like Sleeping Beauty or Cinderella, you know. But you can get shot by a blunderbuss. That's pretty cool. Never been wounded by one of those. But so, yeah, so you can go. I guess that's things to do.
Grievous wounds.
So William and Mary, and obviously that's the college also, and that's where Thomas Jefferson went. So that brings up some other things. Remember, the Whig Party is the Scottish philosophy that says we the people, right? So the Constitution of the United States is essentially a Whig experiment. That's really weird. It has nothing to do with Whigs. That's not why they're called that. But it is spelled the same, isn't it?
No, it's W-H-I-G.
W-H.
Yeah.
Isn't that what Whig is? How do
No,
you spell
Whig
it?
is-
Whig is W-I-G.
Yeah.
Ah, okay. So political faction in the parliaments of England, Scotland, Great Britain, etc. The Tories are the ones that support James, because they would actually like to have absolute monarchy again, but the Whigs are the ones that support the laws that restrain the monarch from doing certain things, that basically uphold Parliament's point of view. So this is the association we have with obviously, in the United States. We did have Tories here, but remember they were British sympathizers, they were traitors, and most of them fled as they realized what was happening. Right, so the Whigs actually win in the United States, even though they lost in the Scottish Rebellion, but they did, of course, have power and brought William and Mary in for the Glorious Revolution, so-called.
They still wear wigs in Parliament in England as well.
So the Glorious Revolution. 1688. So 16. I think Charles II died, I think, in 1685. James II, his brother, took over in 1685 and lasted to 1688. All right. So. John Locke is part of William and Mary's coterie, or cabinet, or whatever you want to call it. So when we're looking at Locke, 1632 to 1704. He's a physician, so he's also William's court physician. He's actually already famous because he's done some really serious operations on others and really saved them from severe things. So he was very good for the time. Lord Shaftesbury, for example, was one of those that he operated on and saved his life. So he's very highly regarded among the British nobility. Very educated man, and so on. And there's two main philosophical things that he's going to do that we especially like to cover in intro courses. The first thing is his redoing of Hobbes' social contract. So remember, our legitimating narrative that makes us think that our Constitution is a good document. It's you know, that's the way a government should be organized, based on this narrative. We, the people, come together, organize our government for our benefit as individuals, right? So that's the narrative. Now remember, it was originally Hobbes that gives us that social contract. Rousseau is also going to give another variant of that, but Locke is the one that we're really based on, and that's because Thomas Jefferson liked Locke's. He's familiar with John Locke, Francis Bacon, and Sir Isaac Newton. Remember, those were his three heroes, right? Thomas Jefferson and John Locke. So what's different with John Locke's theory of the social contract? It's again based on philosophical reasons, the same as Hobbes. So they're actually opposed to philosophers that argue the divine right of kings. Bossan, I forget, there's a French philosopher that's a contemporary that they actually argue with. Bosset, I forget what his name is. No one reads them, because no one believes that anymore, right? You know, the divine right of kings, nah, we don't accept that. Instead, Hobbes argues that we, the people, form this contract in order to protect ourselves, and the best kind of government for that protection is an absolute monarch. That's Hobbes, right? Locke comes in and argues, well, what would you think? He's in on the side of the limited monarch, William, right? You see the connection, right? Well, here comes a limited monarch. The kind of government, he argues, is not based on primarily security, but instead he argues, okay, so in this hypothetical state of nature that Hobbes comes up with to explain why we form the government. He says it's a dog-eat-dog world with everyone after everyone else's blood, taking whatever they could get, and no love and affection, right? Well, Locke comes in and says, no, it's all one big loving family in the hypothetical state of nature. Now, he doesn't actually have a family, so he's not a family man, right? But nonetheless, he argues that everybody in the state of nature loves one another. Mom is in charge, basically. And the problem is it gets to be too many of us, and so we have to form some kind of government in order to organize things, right? And so what we have is basically a government that protects us, but at the same time makes sure that we don't have some miserable clodhopper in charge of us, right? So we have laws that are created by the legislative body, and they're executed by the executive, right? But if the executive isn't following the laws, then we can throw out the bastard, right? And replace him with someone else that we like, right? So they have to behave according to the contract. And it's limited. There's only certain things you guys can do, right? Now, if Parliament says it's the Church of England, not Catholic, then you can't turn around and say, well, but we want to have Catholics. No, you're not allowed to do that. So we have, in the English system, we have checks and balances, right? The legislative body has the one authority, and the executive has the other. And the judiciary is part of the executive. Notice Jefferson piles up even more opportunities for checks and balances, because what we end up with, of course, is 3 different parts of government. The judiciary is separate. They're, of course, tied together in ways. The executive appoints, the Senate approves, and then we get a Supreme Court, for example, which, by the way, we're not going to get, because the Senate has said we're not even going to discuss any of Obama's possible appointees. We're not even going to discuss it, because we're going to wait until President Trump. Sorry.
That's probably true.
You look very puzzled.
Don't say that.
Don't say that. Ooh. Sorry. Actually, I should show you David Brooks's interesting argument. This was Friday. Now, if you read David Brooks. We live in a big, diverse society. There are essentially 2 ways to maintain order and get things done in such a society: politics or some form of dictatorship, either through compromise or brute force. Our founding fathers chose politics. Politics is an activity in which you recognize the simultaneous existence of different groups, interests, and opinions. You try to find some way to balance or reconcile or compromise those interests, or at least a majority of them. You follow a set of rules enshrined in a constitution or in custom to help you reach these compromises in a way everyone considers legitimate. The downside of politics is that people never really get everything they want. It's messy, limited, and no issue is ever really settled. Politics is a muddled activity in which people have to recognize restraints and settle for less than they want. Disappointment is normal. But that's sort of the beauty of politics, too. It involves an endless conversation in which we learn about other people and see things from their vantage point and try to balance their needs against our own. This is like John Locke, right? Plus, it's better than the alternative rule by some authoritarian tyrant who tries to govern by clobbering everyone in his way. That sounds like Hobbes. As Bernard Crick wrote in his book in Defense of Politics, politics is a way of ruling divided societies without undue violence. Over the past generation, we have seen the rise of a group of people who are against politics. These groups, best exemplified by the Tea Party, but not exclusive to the right, want to elect people who have no political experience. They want outsiders. They delegitimize compromise and deal-making. They're willing to trample the customs and rules that give legitimacy to legislative decision-making if it helps them gain power. Ultimately, they don't recognize other people. They suffer from a form of political narcissism in which they don't accept the legitimacy of other interests and opinions. They don't recognize restraints. They want total victories for themselves and their doctrine. This anti-politics tendency has had a wretched effect on our democracy. It has led to a series of overlapping downward spirals. The anti-politics people elect legislators who have no political skills or experience. That incompetence leads to dysfunctional government, which leads to more disgust with government, which leads to a demand for even more outsiders. The anti-politics people don't accept that politics is a limited activity. They make soaring promises and raise ridiculous expectations. When those expectations are not met, voters grow cynical and disgusted, turn even further in the direction of anti-politics. The anti-politics people refuse compromise, and so block the legislative process. The absence of accomplishment destroys public trust. The decline in trust makes deal-making harder. We're now at a point where the Senate says it won't even hold hearings on a presidential Supreme Court nominee, in clear defiance of custom in the Constitution. We're now at a point in which politicians live in fear if they try to compromise and legislate. We're now at a point in which normal political conversation is broken down. People feel unheard, which makes them shout even louder, which further destroys conversation. And in walks Donald Trump. People say that Trump is an unconventional candidate and that he represents a break from politics as usual. That's not true. Well, actually it is. Trump is the culmination of the trends we have been seeing for the last 30 years. The desire for outsiders, the bashing style of rhetoric that makes conversation impossible, the decline of coherent political parties, the declining importance of policy, the tendency to fight cultural battles, and identity wars through political means. Trump represents the path the founders rejected. There is a hint of violence undergirding his campaign. There's always a whiff, sometimes more than a whiff, of I'd like to punch him in the face. I printed out a Times list of the insults Trump has hurled on Twitter. The list took up 33 pages. Trump's style is bashing, and did you see him squeezing the bottle and say, "There's Rubio"? Did you see that? No. Trump's style is bashing and pummeling. Everyone who opposes or disagrees with him is an idiot, moron, or a loser. The implied promise of his campaign is that he will come to Washington and bully his way through. Trump's supporters aren't looking for a political process to address their needs. They're looking for a superhero. As the political scientist Matthew McWilliams found, the one trait that best predicts whether you're a Trump supporter is how high you score on tests that measure authoritarianism. This isn't just an American phenomenon. Politics is in retreat, and authoritarianism is on the rise worldwide. The answer to Trump is politics. It's acknowledging other people exist. It's taking pleasure in that difference and hammering out workable arrangements. As Harold Lasky put it, we shall make the basis of our state consent to disagreement. Therein shall we ensure its deepest harmony. So that's David Brooks on Friday, in case you're interested.
Is he a political
Saying this-
commentator or?
Oh, yes,
Okay.
yes. He's on TV a lot too.
Okay.
TV, you know that, like,
I've
some
heard
people
of it.
have these, yeah. These, it's like how you turn them on. People like come out of the.
Thought they were trapped inside there.
They're pixelated. So, so Locke's one main addition to our history of philosophy, very, very significant, is the idea of checks and balances in government so that we don't have anyone getting their way. You have to use politics, as David Brooks basically describes it. You have to use diplomacy, you have to compromise, etc., in order to get things done. The second thing that he does, and the quiz question that I have posed for you today, how do you resolve the epistemological problem of empiricism? And here's where the problem arises. Remember with Hobbes, all of our knowledge enters into our senses as movements that then continue through bouncing around, create imagination, thoughts, and responses, right? So that's how knowledge enters in. John Locke argues in agreement with Hobbes that that's how all knowledge enters into our brain, and in fact he's famous for referring to our brain as a tabula rasa, which is basically this. We call it a table, but if you take a table and you put it up onto the wall, notice it's now a chalkboard or whatever, right? And if it's completely erased, it's a tabula rasa, a blank slate, right? So, or an empty table, right? So the idea is that at birth, our minds are a blank slate. And this becomes kind of a philosophical laughing stock, just the same way that Descartes' mind-body dualism did. And we could see that in, Steven Pinker's book, The Blank Slate, picking on John Locke, because today, of course, we don't feel like our minds are blank slates at birth. Not only do we know that our minds are already organized a certain way so that they're predisposed towards taking care of our bodies, language, interacting with other people, and so on, but also our earbuds have been picking up noises from roughly 3 months or so in the womb, so it's not an empty, blank womb, it's a womb with a view, right? Basically, right? So we're learning lots of stuff along with mom. I still remember the face on my daughter's my daughter's face when we went to the hospital to pick her up. She was 3 days old, and we went to pick up our daughter, and she looked at me as I said, "Oh, hello," and she looked at me with a face that said, "Who the hell are you?" But she didn't recognize my voice, right? You know, she knows what voices she could hear all those months, right? And I come in and, what, we're going to learn how to talk from Philly? You can imagine, Hey, what's the matter, you? No, we don't really talk like that yet. It's fake. It's just for the movies. So, that being the case, we know that, that we're not a blank slate. We've got all sorts of stuff already predisposed to perceiving certain things. Still, when I'm looking, so I'm looking at that wall. I don't know, see the wall? There's the wall. What color is that wall? Anybody want to offer?
Whitish.
Whitish?
Eggshell.
Eggshell. The other? Ash, pale, white, off-white. What is off-white? You ever said?
Not quite white.
Not quite white.
Yeah, it's not like as bright as it should be.
I've often been called Caucasian, and I've looked it up. Any of you called Caucasian? Any of you? No? If you look it up, you'll discover that there's a place called the Caucasus Mountains. I'm not from there. I've never met anyone that I know is from there. I have no idea how I got lumped together with those people. It's just really weird. But so I'll go with off-white, because that's just so off-white. Well, I hate to tell you this, but the wall is actually no color at all. It just looks that way to you.
It's an absence of color.
I don't know that a wall has any color at all. Color can only arise when it's perceived by a sense that interprets wavelength as colors, right?
Well, isn't, like, by our definition of color, doesn't it meet the requirement to be called off-white?
Right.
Because that's like
Right,
something
but
that we define.
what we're saying though, so what Locke gives us is, it's a primary and secondary quality. So this is Locke in the essay concerning human understanding, which is part of our text. Primary qualities are thought to be properties of objects that are independent of any observer, right? Such as solidity, extension, motion, number, and figure. Secondary qualities are thought to be the properties that produce sensations in observers, such as color, taste, smell, and sound. So my senses interacting with the object give me the impression that the wall has a certain color. Actually, it depends on my light too. So at different times of the day, that wall looks different. And it could look different to me than, I don't know, if Jeremy sees colors. How do I know if his colors are the same as my colors? I mean, our retinas are probably functioning the same way. The parts of the brain where all those signals are going are probably all arranged similarly. It makes sense to think that we're seeing it the same way, although of course there are some people that have trouble with like color blindness and you know, other issues, right? You know, myopia, things of that sort.
Well, and you could measure the light that's reflected off of it with some sort of instrument and determine what color it is.
Wavelengths.
Yeah.
The wavelengths will tell you what color it's supposed to appear as.
Would that be a solution to this problem, though?
It would seem so. I mean, it gives you an actual measurement of a property.
But that's not actually a color, though. What we're saying is, okay, so that wavelength creates this color in us, but the wavelength is not
The color
that
itself.
color.
Hmm.
So color is an abstract.
What Locke gives us is the idea that we can't really see the thing in itself, which is another interesting word. Which, by the way, will become a formal phrase. So in French, it's I don't know the French. In German, it's the das Ding an sich, the thing in itself. Right? And that's a very formal phrase in German because they don't usually use it for anything else. En soi is in itself, but I don't know. I don't know what the formal French is. Yeah,
We.
might not. Chose en soi. So a thing, literally just thing en soi. So that's pretty cool. Thing that's, so it's a formal expression that means, well, so I believe the thing is there, and that would be dumb for me to think otherwise. All the stuff that I see here, taste, touch, and smell, and so on, are there. The thing is, my perception of them is essentially unique to me. Probably shared, I would assume, in lots of different ways. But the thing is, how do I know? How do I know that the color of your sweater, as I see it, is the same color that you see, right?
But that goes back to the basic thing itself. It has to exist in a certain state in order for your perception to match what you've seen before and his perception to match what he's seen before.
Absolutely, no problem there. And John Locke argues, well, and yes, all of those things in themselves persist apart from God's awareness of them as material things in themselves. So those things are really there. And I see them. It's just that the way they see, I see them, hear them, taste them, touch them, etc., is not the way they actually are in themselves, but as they appear to me. Slight difference, right? But notice the problem is, how do I know the way they appear to me is the way they really are? Well, but they really aren't that way. Snakes seeing that wall wouldn't notice the color the way I see it. If I see a rabbit, as Google did the other day, it hopped in the middle, added 29, right? As I see a rabbit hopping around, I see fluffy little thing, I feel bad because of the time I killed a rabbit. Did I tell you about that? Oh my goodness, I was driving, it was late at night, I was coming back from work when I was, working for a food market, driving down the road. I see this rabbit come running from this side of the road. Being tired, I quick swerved to avoid hitting it and ran over it in the middle of the other lane. I felt so bad.
Because it stopped.
Because if I had just ignored it, it would have been fine. But because I reacted to it, I ran over it. So I felt so bad. I got out and I looked at it. I was looking at it, and another car pulled up. It was a woman, blonde, by the way. She came. It's just I have all these blonde stories. But so she came up, and she said, "Oh, it's such a. I might be able to help it." So she went back to her car, came back with this spray can, and she sprayed it, sprayed it, and sprayed it. After a while, the rabbit sat up and looked at us and went, and then hopped a little bit, and I went like this, and then hopped a little further and went like this, hopped all the way over to the woods, turned, went like this, and then hopped off into the woods. I said, "What the heck did you do?" And she showed me the can. It was hairspray. It said, "Revives dead hair, creates permanent wave."
Wah, wah, wah.
It's just a joke. Oh well. So I gave you the quiz question. Actually, we're almost done, aren't we? Okay, well, this is the problem. You're still laughing. That's so dumb. Right? You're going to tell that 2 or 3 times today, I can tell. She liked that one. Well, on that note, I guess we'll quit. She won't be able to concentrate.
Your students cry. It's terrible.
Yes, I feel so bad I made one of those students cry. Your mom will like it, right?
She doesn't like the same jokes that I do.
Oh, well.
My dad would adopt that because everyone knows.
Good stuff.
So we got our second midterm due, or second test due on Wednesday, yeah? Wednesday-ish?
I think I've had some people already sending it in, actually, but
Super nice. She's hilarious.
let me double check.
We got 2 out of the 3 written.
Why?
So we're looking at March.
My dude's like, oh, I don't know.
Second exam, so it's due the 3rd.
Well, she was
March
making that. She's
3rd.
like, well, whatever. Why do you care so
Oh,
much?
is that Monday? What day is it?
No, today is Tuesday, the 1st. So it would be Thursday.
Thursday, okay. Yeah, I'm all mixed up. All right.
She was gonna have like that.
I have a headache that will not relent this morning. It's finally starting to subside. You gotta take it
You
up.
want me to tell you another joke, or?
I have a joke for you. So a blonde walks into a bar and she orders a drink. She starts talking to the bartender. She said, "I'm really excited about the space program that I'm involved in." And he goes, "Oh, really? Well, what's going on?" So, "Well, we have this mission that's going to take place really soon. We're launching a rocket to go study the sun." It's like, "The sun? Aren't you going to burn up when you do that?"
You silly,
She
we're
goes,
going at night.
"Don't be silly. We're going at night." Stop me if you've heard this before.
That's actually an old Russian joke.
Oh, is it?
Yeah,
The Americans?
the Presidium of the Supreme Soviet, called the scientists, "We're going to beat the Americans. They've gone to the moon. Well, we're going to be the first to go to the sun." I said, "What? You'd burn up." "No, you silly. We're going to go at night."
Yeah. My mom, she's a blonde, but she loves blonde jokes. She thinks it's the funniest thing. She has a bunch. I don't remember hardly any of them anymore. Because I don't have hair, so I don't fall into any category. Oh, that was joking. Other than bald.
I don't recall ever having a student crying after I told a joke.
That was good. That was good. That was a good
She
reaction.
liked that one.
Yeah.
Oh well, what can I say?
This is cool because it's paralleling what we're learning in Western civilization. So, I just learned about William of Orange and the House of Orange and the Habsburgs and all them.
And so that's all cool, huh?
Yeah, I like that kind of stuff though. I did notice that they were yawning earlier though, so maybe that's
Yeah, I tried talking faster. And I don't know if that makes it worse or. Yeah, the one young man fell asleep totally in the back.
Oh really?
Yeah.
No. Oh,
Oh well.
it is what it is. We'll see you on
Yeah.
Thursday.
Yeah, I do actually have like a syllabus. I have to cover
Have to
it.
deliver.
Yeah, so.
Were you recording today?
Oh, come to think of it. Yes.
Okay.
Thanks.